Hello, and today I'm going to talk about what is anxiety. Hi, I'm Fran Power from Empowered Existence, and we specialise in mental health education for adults and young people alike. So, today we're going to talk about anxiety, and we're also going to touch on why it's useful and why everyone has it. So, anxiety comes from the time when we used to be cavemen. Every single caveman would have to have anxiety as a way to keep themselves alive and to protect themselves. If we didn't have the anxiety through us, then we wouldn't be aware of how to protect ourselves and we wouldn't have evolved as a species. So, although anxiety now can be quite annoying, it can be quite frustrating, it can be tiring and exhausting, and can cause a lot of problems, it is actually useful. And there are ways that we can learn to manage it and to live with it so that we can have a happy and healthy life. So, to start with a little bit of education on what anxiety actually is. So, when we were cavemen and we had to go out trying to find some food, we would have to be careful if we ran into a saber-toothed tiger. If we did run into a saber-toothed tiger, there were 4 different responses that we would do. You may have heard of the fight, flight, or freeze response. So, if we was to see a saber-toothed tiger, we would have to decide really quickly how we were best to survive. Could we fight this tiger? Were we strong enough to fight this tiger? In today's time, when our anxiety or our sympathetic nervous system is triggered, so our stress response is triggered, we may become a fighter. You may see signs in yourself or in your children or your young people, such as screaming, slamming doors, yelling, picking fights. This often indicates that something is unsettled within them. They may be feeling a little bit stressed, there may be high tension, or they may be anxious. If we decided that we couldn't fight the saber-toothed tiger, we weren't strong enough, then we would think, are we fast enough to run away from it? This is our flight response. Our flight response, you may see people running away from situations, avoiding situations, not doing things that trigger their stress response, such as sitting in exams or going out to social events, because the anxiety is too overwhelming. So we flee, we run, we flight. If we decided that we weren't fast enough to fly away, run away from the saber-toothed tiger, then we would try and freeze, play dead. If we were dead, the saber-toothed tiger might leave us alone. So you might see in yourself or someone else the freeze response. This is when someone says something nasty to you and you don't even have anything to say back. You suddenly get so anxious that you just can't say anything, you can't walk away, you can't do anything. And then later you have that, oh, why didn't I just say this or do this? Because your body goes into freeze. You cannot do anything. So sometimes you may see young people playing lots of video games. They may be watching lots of TV or social media. They're basically just freezing themselves out of life. The last response, which is a newer response, is called the fawn response. Now, the fawn response is when we can't run away, we can't fight, and we can't play dead from the saber-toothed tiger. So we think if we be really cute and act like a little baby kitten, then maybe the saber-toothed tiger will take us under its wing and look after us. So what you might see in today's time of the fawn response of anxiety is always people pleasing, always saying yes. Now, although that might sound like a good thing, it does come at the detriment of the person who is always saying yes, because resentment and anger can build as a result. No response is right or wrong, and you will probably notice 1 or maybe 2 traits within yourself. We will all do all 4 responses from time to time, but we all have anxiety. Every single human being has anxiety as part of their system, as part of their body. So when we learn to understand that we all have anxiety, and anxiety was useful at some time and can sometimes still be useful now, when we have something that we are really connected to, something that we want to do really well in, then a little bit of anxiety can help us achieve that. So if we were doing a school project and we really cared about the subject, we really wanted to impress the teacher and our students and do a really nice presentation, then we may stay up at night, we may work a little bit harder, we will do as well as we can on that presentation. However, if the anxiety becomes too much and we are too worried about the presentation, then it can fall into procrastination, avoidance, and other symptoms of the fight, flight, freeze response. So there is an optimal level, and so sometimes it can be helpful. What we want to watch out for is when it's tipping too much and becoming unhelpful in our lives. Sometimes we can have ruminating thoughts all day long where we're constantly trying to figure out how to protect ourselves from the underlying danger. Sometimes we can avoid life and avoid things that actually would make us happy if we had the confidence or the strength to go and do them. So in a later video, I'm going to talk about how to tackle some of those things. But this today was just to give you an understanding that anxiety is normal and what you might see in someone who's experiencing anxiety. And all the responses that you see are very normal for young people. So sometimes, a young person might come home from school and all of a sudden they're fighting with you and you don't understand why or what's happened. There may be something that happened at school that they've been holding in that's been setting off their fight or flight response. And when they've come home and felt safe and comfortable with you, they've allowed that to come out of themselves and to be shown. Now, you've listened to me talk about the fight, flight, and fawn response and what that might look like physically in someone. And some of the symptoms you might notice are to do with, again, in response to protecting ourselves. So if we had to run away from a saber-toothed tiger, we would have to make sure that all of our major organs were protected. So what would happen is all of our blood would come into our major organs to protect them, which is why we can sometimes feel numbness in our fingers, we can feel tingling in our toes, we might feel lightheaded or a little bit dizzy. We can sometimes get stomach upsets. Our body would sometimes like to try and lose as much weight and drop as much weight so we can run faster. So we might find that we suddenly need to go to the toilet. We might feel like we need to vomit. We can get tension headaches from trying to hold ourselves in a freeze response. All of these responses are very, very normal responses. And there are things we can do to try and counteract those. So make sure you check in, stay tuned for when I talk about how to manage anxiety. Thank you.